would be better able to answer this than I, but you know, we've proved during the 30+ training sessions that we held during this election season with poll workers and judges of elections. I think it was about 34 different election sessions, that it doesn't matter how you put your ballot in. If you put it in upside down, backwards, it will still take an image of that, and it will still be counted. You know, that there is, you can turn it upside down and whatever you wish to do. And it still will be read by the machine. That's the quality of the technology there. And finally, you know, we have, you know, this is probably the largest ballot that we produce all 4 years. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and we try to, we have certainly tried to make sure that we were doing the highest quality work and also keeping to the time frames that are required. And you know, I think that we adhered to that, and it's just, you know, again, a regrettable error. Nobody did that intentionally. The moment we found out what was, you know, what the impact was, we immediately sought to give advice to the public, and you know, it is our desire to never have that happen again. I don't know if anybody would like, from our team, would like to add to what I've said, or.
Okay. And does anyone from the county management want to speak?
Denise, Dave Parsnick.
Go ahead, Mr. Parsnick.
So the county's has a partnership with Dominion. We've used the same LNA process for the last 3 elections. We have worked very closely with them. We give them the files. They then take the files once we finalize them and approve them and build their programs into the machines. And I believe Nicole stated it correctly. This was a human error. I don't believe there was any intent by Dominion to do anything with the election other than we had this human error, which caused much angst compared to, you know, what we all went through for the last election. As Mr. Morgan stated, we have all the results. We have all the ballots. We had 56,000 votes. We had about 38 or 39,000 by the machines and 17,000 by the mail-in. The results captured all that. The provisionals, which we adjudicated the other day, were in the neighborhood of 500. If we need to do audits, we can certainly do that. It is also our intent to have this never happen again. I will be doing checks with Dominion after the programming is completed to go through every step so I could read every programming window that they have on the machine to make sure that nothing gets mistyped ever again. The Election Bureau worked very hard in this election to make sure all their tasks and all their lists were covered. I was working with 2 brand new people. I gave them a project list. They did a great job of making sure that we didn't miss anything on the project list. Everything was done on time, and we will learn from this and we will move forward.
Okay, anybody else from either Dominion, County Management, or the Bureau of Election? Okay, we're going to move now into the board members having an opportunity to ask questions.
Denise, this is Rick. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Nicole, has an error like this ever occurred in the past within your organization?
A data entry error for a specific election?
Yes.
Yes.
So does Dominion track their service errors to their clients or customers in a manner that you can accumulate repeated errors or one-off errors or isolated errors? Is there a methodology internally that you use to track types of errors that result in, I'll say, a failure within in the election process?
So what we do is we, in an effort to constantly improve the way that we support elections, is we take information as we assist our customers in executing the elections, and constantly improve our standard operating procedures for how we support our customers. So the information that we glean from every election is then used to improve our standard operating procedures for supporting elections.
So okay, I can understand you learn where errors occur and you don't want them to occur again. So let's figure out how to improve them. My guess is you run into machine errors, you run into process errors, you run into programming errors, you run into operator errors. Is there any kind of error that is more frequent that you've experienced than others? Because we've had machine issues, we've had people issues, and might even had some process issues here.
So I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yes, I'm wondering if you categorize your issues, your failures to your clients in any way. Like, is it do most of the problems revolve around people issues like human error? Do they revolve around programming or machine failure? Do you categorize it in any way, shape, or form that internally within your organization?
So what we attempt to do is do an after action report when our elections complete, and we do that in partnership with our customers. And so in terms of an after action report or a postmortem, if you will, we do endeavor to do that with every election with our customers. So the answer to your question is yes, we do.
Is that soon after the election, immediately after, or is it sometime down the road?
It depends on the scheduling for everyone involved. So, for example, this election, that election day was last week, is still very much underway. We're still adjudicating. We haven't canvassed yet. So, in terms of any type of after action report for this election, we will need to conclude this election before we can do that.
Okay. Denise, I have a question for Dave Parson.
Go right ahead.
Dave, within the Bureau of Elections, at the time you review the machines, tell me, is that a week ahead of time, or 3 days, 2 weeks, or the day of, when you're looking at making sure everything is proper?
So it's usually about a week or a week and a half. So if the election's on Tuesday, we work with Dominion to have the machines ready to go by that Wednesday so they could start being delivered before the election. Usually takes Dominion about 5 or 6 days to program and LNA and test everything. Sometimes it takes a little longer depending on if we're having issues with some of the machines at the voters' warehouse. So, they worked on some issues this time that we had some printers jamming, and they took care of that. There was also some other tablets that were not functioning correctly, so we had to swap them out with the spares that we have. So it was a little more involved this time because we had a little bit more of an issue with some of the machines not coming up correctly, but we got through all that. So it usually takes about 2 weeks before the election to get everything completed where we want it to be.
And Dave, are you the only one involved in that from the Bureau, or is there multiple eyeballs on this program, on this review?
The review from what level, Richard?
No, from your investment, from the point where you're looking to make sure all these machines are working. Is it just Dave, or are there other folks with you to support you or work alongside of you, or is it just your eyeballs with the folks from Dominion?
So it's just me at this point working with the folks from Dominion. They're familiar with the setup of what we do. I'm familiar with what they do and how the warehouse is set up, and then all the other tasks that need to go along with the programming, the LNA testing that they conduct, and then the actual delivery of the machines and doing all that scheduling. So that's basically me doing that with those vendors, because we have the other folks, Aaron and Bob and the other girls in the office. There's many other tasks that need to be done as well in conjunction with the machines.
Dave, how many pieces of equipment are necessary to be working properly to affect a legitimate election? You have tabulators, you have voting machines, you have tablets. How many pieces of equipment are you really looking at?
Well, we have about 710 tablets on the carts, and we have about 220 or a little better scanners, which count all the votes, and they need to all be programmed and tested and ready to go.
Okay, and when you're reviewing these, how many, do you look at one? Do you look at 10? Do you look at a statistically valid sampling to conclude that everything's working okay? Or do you look at every one?
I do not look at everyone. It's simply, I cannot physically look at everyone.
Yeah, and I'm not beating you up for not looking. I don't blame you, but
I
I
rely
just want to
on,
learn.
yeah, I understand, Richard. I cannot physically look at everyone. There are some that we look at as I'm in there when they're programming the machines to make sure that the machines are coming up correctly, and the printer jams, we were taking care of that. I don't look at everyone. We do spot checks on some of the machines to make sure the ballots populate, and then they put their ballots in through the scanners, and we make sure that they're all being counted correctly and they're all barcoded correctly.
Okay, so it's conceivable, not necessarily probable, but it's conceivable that you look at machines and they're working just fine, but after they are deployed to the polling locations, we could find a machine that is, there's a failure.
It's possible, because in the delivery of the machines, sometimes these machines are a little picky, and they work fine when they're coming out, and they might get maybe bumped or so on the delivery, and it ends up with the printer jam or a printer not working correctly. So it's possible.
Okay, have you ever experienced that where it worked inside the warehouse and not at the polling place?
Yeah, we've had a few machines that's happened.
Okay. And Denise, I have a question for Mr. Morgan.
Go right ahead, Mr. Morgan.
So Bob, early on, and I voted about 7:30 in Slocum Township, and I had the same feeling that has already been expressed here. And the girls at the polling place, they did a great job, but their explanation of what was going on was 100% inaccurate. I won't say what it was, but it was inaccurate. So after this came to your attention, I was just wondering, how was it communicated? How was this failure communicated to all of the poll workers? And was there a standard comment that they should have been given the voters? Because having talked to numerous voters in the community, I heard different people receive different information. And I even stopped by our polling place on the way home that night, and they were telling everybody what was wrong, but there wasn't anything posted. So I'm not knocking anybody for this. I'm not looking for blame at all. I'm just looking to hear if there was a standard communique to all polling places that our poll workers should have utilized. So we had consistency throughout the county.
Yes, actually what happened was now, first of all, kind of the timeline, we were still at 7:30 in the morning, we were still kind of diagnosing to make sure that we understood, what the impact was. So we had not communicated with anybody beyond kind of understanding the call coming in. We were busy testing to make sure that the ballots were printing correctly and things of that nature. So we began to call all the judges of election with the instructions that Republican voters should be allowed to vote by machine, explaining that there was a Democratic header above the Republican ballot, that did not impact the downstream races, that Republicans were welcome to vote by machine, by emergency ballot, or by a provisional ballot. And we asked, because for a way to get it out there as quickly as possible, we asked the judge to, make up a sign saying that, Republicans were welcome to use the machine, an emergency ballot, or a provisional ballot. We put that on our website, and we communicated that through the media. And so as quickly as we possibly could. So we wanted to get there for the next news broadcast.
Okay, and just a little bit separate from that, one of the comments earlier on was about training and our poll workers. So I have a question for Erin. Erin, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here, Rick.
How many poll workers were hired?
Well, they didn't hand in like their pay slips yet or anything, but there's
Roughly.
yeah, so about 186 precincts times about 5 per precinct. So we're looking at just shy of 1,000.
And how many training sessions were provided for those 1,000 workers?
I don't have the exact number with me, but I don't know if Bob knows. I know he mentioned
I believe it was 34 sessions over a period of about 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
So I just want to get the concept in my brain right. We have about 1,000 people coming in for 1 day of work. We give them, what, an hour of training, half hour training, 2 hours of training, Bob?
It depends on what is they're training on. If they're training on exclusively checking voters in, poll book, that sort of thing, that's probably an hour and a half. If we do the judge of elections training and the machine training together, that's 2.5 hours.
Okay, so I can see where out of 1,000 people, there might be some gaps of remembering what they were trained 3 weeks ago on the election day. So I can understand a little bit about that. Maybe we should talk about that in the future. I don't have any other questions at this point. Just want to recall, I think once you told me we have about 6 employees full-time in the Bureau.
Yes.
And on 1 day, it swells to 1,006.
Yes, and actually it swells to because there are about 30 people in the operation involved in doing mail-in ballots.
All right, so and how would you, well, let me ask Dave this question. How would you describe the relationship, the working relationship with the folks at Dominion?
I have a good relationship with the folks at Dominion. We work together. If there's issues, I get them addressed. They are more than willing to take care of our problems. I don't really have any issues with the Dominion folks.
And Nicole, how do you find working with Luzerne County?
We consider our relationship with Luzerne County a long-term partnership, and we like to address all of our issues and our successes as a partnership. And we look forward to our ongoing partnership as we continue to assist them with elections.
I don't have any, at this point, I don't have any other questions, Denise.
Thank you. Any other board members have any questions?
Hi,
only
this is Missy.
Oops, sorry, go ahead, Missy.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Kathy. I just have a question for Nicole. I know that it's been reiterated many times over this phone call that the voters have lost confidence in Dominion. They have lost their faith in voting. We need to change that. I don't know how going forward we can do that successfully. I signed up for this board to do just that, to change the perspective and make sure that everyone felt confident when they go to the voter machines on election day. I'm interested in finding out about this forensic audit. I am in 100% in agreement that it needs to be done. I have seen, I was only there a short few hours that evening, election night. These people, they donate their time and their energy and their work to the bone, quite honestly, and I respect each and every one of them. Things that I saw just that short time I was there, they deserve a lot of credit. I don't know what a forensic audit looks like, but I don't know if we have the manpower for that. And I know that John spoke of fees being waived or what have you. I think it goes greater than that. I think that we need to look at resources, not only financially, but actual manpower being brought into Luzerne County to assist with this, and really move forward and try to gain back the confidence of the voters for Luzerne County. I don't know if you can speak to that today, but going forward, I think that we need to correct the issues that happened that night.
So, Ms. Thomas, I appreciate your candid feedback, and I will say this: there are in every election that has been run in Luzerne County since Luzerne partnered with Dominion, you have 100% paper backup, a paper trail of all of the votes that have been cast on the Dominion system. It doesn't get any clearer, any more transparent than the paper backup. So this is the best way to audit, to confirm the original count of those elections. So Luzerne has 100% paper trail of every election. So in any recounts, in any audits, in any sort of post-election action, you can do a count of the paper, and that provides 100% transparency to the election. I will also say that Dominion, unfortunately, has been the target of a disinformation campaign, and I truly apologize for the people on this call, and more broadly than that, that have been lied to. And we at Dominion do not lie. And if you want full transparency in the elections in Luzerne County, please go to the paper backup. I personally have been a target. My family has been a target related to the misinformation that's been promulgated since November 3rd. And I share the sentiments of the people on this call. And I just want to say again that you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take Dominion's word for it. There is 100% paper backup to confirm the results of the election.
Ms. Roth, did you want to say something? I think you were both talking when Ms. Thomas was going to talk. Maybe somebody else was. Maybe it was Audrey.
No, it was me. The only question I have, because I know there were questions as to whether or not the machines are online at any point, if it's wireless or, I know they're not hardwired because you can tell that when you're actually voting, but I know that was a concern that someone could potentially get in and, when there were errors, like how were the errors corrected? Were they corrected remotely or were they corrected on site with the header and everything else?
So the header wasn't corrected, Kathy. It was, we had to send out messages to all the judges that this is the way it is. Those machines are standalone. There's no way to get in them to do any more programming at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
Denise, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I'm going to throw it out there. And it is for Dominion. Recognizing there is a paper backup, and even if Luzerne County went out and had a statistically valid audit completed, and that audit proved that Dominion machines were exactly as you say they are, there wasn't any issue, and everything matched up perfectly. That would be a very interesting quantitative conclusion to draw. Yet, as Missy said, the impact to the integrity of the community is still damaged. And maybe it makes sense to go out and hire a third party on, maybe Walter Griffith and I don't know, Steve Urban can comment on this. Maybe it makes sense to go out and hire a third party to conduct a paper ballot audit and do a comparison. And maybe Dominion should help fund that or fund it, primarily geared to return integrity to the voting public. Get an accounting firm to do it and say, hey, just check the numbers out. It's not an expense I want to burden the county with, but as Missy said, the idea of this board today is kind of to start to restore some level of confidence in the voter population. And, I commented to my wife that Denise is like the captain of the Titanic, our maiden voyage here. We hit an iceberg. And we got to repair that somewhere.
This is Missy. I agree. We hit an iceberg in November, and now we again hit it on Tuesday, and it's just uncalled for. And I don't know how we can backtrack and fix this. I mean, yes, it was a header and it was wrong, but now we're speaking that there was a Republican voter that had a Democratic ticket in front of her and she voted because she didn't know, and that neither here nor there whether she knew her candidates or not. I mean, now we have another issue that we're facing, and like Rick said, Denise is going down with the ship here, and we can't keep doing this. It's just the resources we have are limited to begin with, and these machines, their credibility is lost, and there has to be some sort of training program from the corporate office that we don't have to be running 34 sessions of training our folks. We're at the point now where we're not going to get any volunteers because it's compromised. The system is compromised. Our voting in Luzerne County, we're not going to get the volunteers that we need, and we're in trouble, and we need assistance, and I don't know what that assistance is.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I think she's at a baseball game. And Audrey.
I'm so sorry.
No,
my
that's
son-
okay. No, it actually sounds nice. Ms. Cerniak, did you want to share anything?
Most of this, I've heard a lot of the explanations and all before. I just really, again, want to say, in addition to the voters, the people who really are being affected and who I feel sorry for are all the people in the county and county employees that mostly get pulled away from their jobs, their regular jobs, to conduct this election. They take ownership of it. They take pride in doing a very good job of that on it. There are people who work on these machines, sealing them and just setting them up, getting ready for transport. They're out of their regular jobs for a few days, actually, to do this. And I don't know that a lot of people really appreciate that effort that goes in and just how much competence there is on some of these levels in the Bureau, a lot of longtime employees, and then a lot of people who do volunteer on these elections who have been doing this before. So I just want to commend all those people. They really don't get enough credit. And I don't know that the public really, really understands. I'll tell you about the Titanic. The public just sees that tip. They don't see that whole iceberg, everything that's been going on. But you just really put on an election and try to have a good and solid and fair election. That's basically all I really want to remind people or say.
Okay.
If I may, I talked about it earlier, this election is probably the largest ballot in all 4 cycles because of the nonpartisan, the 4 questions that and independents and non-affiliated party members were allowed to vote on. That means that there's 186 polling places because of an oddity in 2 districts. There is a need to divide polling places because of a particular seat that is being elected in those polling places. So there's 192 polling places. That means there are 576 separate ballots that are a part of this election. Every polling place has its own ballot. There are 1,932 candidates or races, unique races on the ballot. Of all the candidates that appeared on the ballot, only 44 appear countywide. So of those 1,932 different races, many of them are literally being held in a single polling place. I'd also like to ask Nicole and I to if we can, Nicole, if you can unmute yourself for 1 second, maybe help me explain something. I had said on Tuesday that this error was due to a coding error. So we need to help explain that, from my standpoint, a coding error was everything that Dominion did. Now you have explained it as a human error, basically a typographical error. Well, I'm not trying to lead you down a path, but I think, is it fair to say that we are both talking about the same thing?
Yes, we are absolutely talking about the same thing. So when typical elections nomenclature, I think, is not correctly and accurately describing what happens when we say coding, it is data entry, and that data, as you mentioned, is very complex. It changes not only with the precincts and the locations, but it changes from election to election. So when you say coding and I say data entry, it is the data and the content that comes together for that specific election to form a ballot, which is unique to precincts, not necessarily unique to voters, but a lot of data entry that has to get organized in the exact correct way.
Great, thank you. So in other words, my referring it to as a coding error is not an untruth. Is that correct? I mean, it's just maybe another name for
That's
what
correct. We're saying the same thing.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I do have some questions. I'm going to start with Nicole. Oh, I'm sorry, I bumped my table. First, when the logic and accuracy test is done before pre-election, I've been listening, and it's made to sound like Dominion does that all on their own. Is that accurate, that you do that all on your own? Is there any representative from Luzerne County who also is part of the logic and accuracy testing?
So the pre-election work, and it's a tremendous workload, gets done in partnership.
Okay, and who is it in partnership with specifically?
Dominion and the county.
Okay, so what county workers do you do the logic and accuracy testing with? Do you do that with the administrative assistants in the election bureau? Or do you do it with leadership in the election bureau?
I can't answer that.
So the logic and accuracy testing, are you aware of what part of the process that the Luzerne County Election Bureau has in the logic and accuracy test? Or maybe let's start with this. What is your part of the process of the Dominion's part of the process of the logic and accuracy test?
I'm probably not the right person to answer this question, but I mean, all of the pre-election, I mean, this is a partnership. So we work together to execute all the pre-election activities, election day and post-election activities in partnership between Dominion and the county.
Okay. So Mr. Morgan and Mr. Parsnick, maybe this would be a question for both of you. What part do you have in what actual part, specific role do you take in the logic and accuracy test for the pre-election?
So
Of the machines, the logic and accuracy test of the machines.
right, so on the machines, the county has a very limited participation in the logic and accuracy testing because the internal programming and the testing of those machines is with Dominion and their expertise. Those machines are all programmed and tested. Dominion then fills out a logistics and accuracy paper for every machine. There's also test ballots that they do to make sure the test ballots are coming out and they're able to be scanned. And our partnership with Dominion relies mostly on Dominion to complete all of that programming and LNA testing on our machines.
Okay, is there a review of the what's programmed into the machines by the Bureau of Election Leadership? Do you run a test on it and look at that screen on the tabulator to see that everything is accurate?
The screen on the tabulator?
Yeah, do you do a test run when after they've programmed it in? Does anyone at the Bureau do a test run to look at what has been programmed in to see if it's accurate?
We have not.
Okay, is there a test run of the machine?
So the test run of the machine is the LNA testing that each machine has. That's the test run.
Is there a run for the public?
There is a public test that we advertise for after all the machines are completed.
And do you run a machine that's been programmed for that, like, okay, there was a test run for this election?
Yes.
And when was that done?
I believe the date was, I want to say the 12th.
So Wednesday, the 12th at?
10 or 11 o'clock, I believe so.
Okay, and was anybody there?
There was not.
Okay, so who ran that and who ran the test and what was involved in the test? What do you show?
So you would vote on the machine using a machine that's programmed for the election. You would vote your candidates into the machine. You would then hit the printer, the ballot would come out, and you would then run that into the scanner to make sure it tabulates correctly.
And you're actually voting for the ballot of this election, not like a previous election's ballot. You're actually voting the ballot for this election in a mock run.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so since no one was there, was there still a test run?
I don't believe there was a test run because there was no one from the public for the LNA.
Okay, so is there any way for the, is there ever any time that Mr. Morgan or Mr. Parsnick that you can see the program ballot? before everything gets locked up and sent to their designated wards or precincts. Do you ever get a visual of what's on the, well, you would with the test run, right?
We would with the test run, correct?
And you didn't see the Republican header?
So I'm the part that was mistyped, I would not have seen that. I would have seen the ballot come up on the machine to make sure it was the Republican and Democrat ballot.
Okay. So you weren't aware of the Republican header?
I was not aware of that until I received a phone call at 7:10 on Tuesday that the header in the Republican, all the program codes said Democrat.
Okay. I have one more question regarding an audit. There, Mr. Nardone was talking about, the questioning whether, the council would want, to pick up a part of an independent audit and all. And I don't know about that. I'm not going, I'm not talking, I'm not saying I'm for or against any. What I want to ask about an audit is, would it be possible to, my thoughts are on an audit that, first off, I don't know personally that this is the 100% blame on Dominion. This is my own personal thought. They have said they've made an error on putting the header on. It was human error, they said. But I just think that there must have been a way for maybe it to be caught before they went out on our end, and to place all the blame on Dominion. I don't know if that's fair, and I don't know if there's there more other others might have a part in this, or it might not just be all their fault. But so with that in mind, with an audit, to ask Dominion to take, pay for a whole independent audit, and that's another thought, an independent audit, if that's a possibility with the contract, to allow an independent audit. Because I don't know if that's allowed with the contract with Dominion, but maybe an independent audit could be allowed as long as you were allowed to observe an independent party doing an audit. But is it their responsibility? My question is, would it be their responsibility to pick up the whole tab? Is there some responsibility on the county level as well? Personally, I asked that question and I wonder about that. I don't know.
Denise, may I comment? I'm not implying at all that Dominion should pick up 100% of anything. This meeting was convened to learn the factors that led to this failure. And there's a number of, I'm just listening to this, and there's a number of contributing factors that led to this failure. It's not 100% in anybody's court. And I think that's something the board has to discuss as to how we might want to go about resolving this issue on a go-forward basis. Personally, people that say we should discharge or fire people or change Dominion, I would love to see what that election looks like in November if we start with a clean slate today. My guess is it would never even come off. So there's issues here that have to be addressed. And I think we should do what we said we're going to do. That is, listen to the contributing factors, analyze them, and come up with some recommendations and solutions to resolve them in a cooperative manner, so that November comes off without a hitch. And just looking at the resources utilized, I'm going to have some conversations with a lot of people regarding the limited resources to pull off such an event. So I'm not asking Dominion to pay for everything, although I would like a contribution. And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I'm going
Any
to-
other board members before we move into the, I'm going to read some of the questions that have been in the question box that may not have been asked by any of the board members. Okay, here is one of the first questions that I'm reading down from the top of the list. So one of the first questions that I see that doesn't look like it may have been answered yet. I think it did partially come up earlier in the public comments was, it says, please ask Nicole why Dominion did not ask to stop the election when they found out the machines were placing the wrong header on the machines and have their techs fix the error.
So when the error was discovered, there were multiple paths to have voters vote on a ballot in several different options they had, so several different manners that they felt was the best way to proceed forward. So I think that the elections officials did a great job of providing the notice to voters of the error and options to allow voters to vote in the manner they felt was most appropriate for them.
Okay, let me see here. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just reading down to get to ones that haven't been asked yet. Okay. That one was asked. I don't know what this means. I'll ask it. Do the Dominion machines use Smartmatic software? Maybe you know what that is.
I do, and they do not. Smartmatic is a completely separate company. Dominion is a competitor of Smartmatic. Dominion uses Dominion software.
Okay. Here's another question, Nicole, or anybody from Dominion. Does Dominion have a connection to George Soros?
No, we do not.
Okay, getting towards the end here.
Can I ask a question to Nicole?
Yes, go ahead while and I'll keep reading. Okay.
Is Dominion 100% owned by Staple, the private equity group?
No, they are a majority owner.
Who are the minority owners?
I don't know right off the top of my head.
Okay. I think that all the questions I see in the question and answer box. Okay. This question is for Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, did you ever review the ballot and do a test run on one of the machines before the election?
I personally did not, no. I reviewed the ballot in every other form. I reviewed the ballot and tested it for purposes of mail-in ballots, And, but I did not personally test the actual machine.
Well, I'll just ask because just out of curiosity, if anybody else would have, Mr. Parsnick or Ms. Harvey, or any of the other election bureau employees?
The answer to that, Denise, is we did not do that.
Okay.
So we rely on the LNA testing coming off the ballot, which we know was correct when we started working with Dominion on the programming. So I'm not blaming Dominion for anything. I don't know if you took it like I was blaming Dominion for this. So this issue is there. It was caused by a human error, which would definitely be in the programming of that header in the activation codes on all those ballots. But with my knowledge of what I know about those machines, I have a checklist for what I need to do when we look at those machines again and we get into the weeds of the actual activation codes with the wording of the activation codes for next time. And I have a plan in place to do that. I think that both sides will need to work better to get this all taken care of and resolved, so this is never an issue again.
Okay, and with that said, I do have just 2 or 3 more questions. The first one is to the Dominion representative. I saw that Fayette County, Pennsylvania had a similar issue to ours. They had difficulty, from what I read in the paper, they had difficulty scanning their barcodes only on the Republican ballot. And in reading that, first, it didn't say if it was Dominion, so it may not even have been Dominion. Do you know if it was a Dominion?
So listen, I do not want to discuss other customers' issues or non-issues on this call. It's not appropriate for me to discuss other customers' election execution.
Okay, and the only reason I asked, because what I was when I read about that, and I don't know if it was another customer or not, I just wondered, but you have already said it was, that you have checked it and it was just a matter of human error on the creation of the header, and that was what caused it.
That's
that
correct.
It wasn't anything else.
That's correct.
And because I did read in some of my research that sometimes when the machines are brought up, say at a polling place for the first time after that could be a time that there could be malware.
Chair, if I just wanted to just interject if I could, and just to echo what Nicole said about talking about other county business. You could also check out our website, dominionvoting.com, where we have such things there. Clearly, we would like to address it and discuss it, maybe to clear that. But right now, if you can appreciate, we're not at liberty to discuss other county matters. The latest news on that site has a statement regarding it if anyone would like to check it out.
Okay. All right. I understand. I just wondered if you're absolutely certain that, and you have said that it was just human error as a part of the coding or putting in of the header. And so the only other question I have, and it would be to both the Bureau and to Dominion, is going forward to the next election, in light of this happening, what will you do differently? What would you do differently to prevent this from happening again?
So on the Dominion side, we are committed to collaborating with Luzerne County on improving our processes and procedures from any pre-election activity to post-election activity. I know we can get there, and I think that with more intense collaboration and a review of this particular election, when it is wrapped up, when the canvas is complete, I am confident we will take steps forward to improve elections going forward.
Okay. And anybody want to speak for the Bureau?
Yeah, Denise, I'll speak for the Bureau.
Okay.
So since that Tuesday, when I got that call early in the morning that there was an issue with this ballot, nobody's harder on themselves than me. So I've been kicking this around every day, 24 hours a day, to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. So I'm going to assign one of my IT folks to be with Dominion when they start the programming of the machines to LNA, and I'm going to give them a checklist of what I now know from my experience this time of what we will need to ask before these machines are closed up and sealed, and even after the LNA is completely done. We will have our own program and procedure for making sure that, especially that the header box is correct where the activation codes are, and the ballot header where the screen would then come up with the correct ballot on it. I have a list of what we need to do. I'm going to assign a person to be with them 24/7 or however long it takes for them to do LNA going forward.
Okay. I do have a question here. I'm trying not to miss anybody, and there are a few questions in here. Some seem like duplicates, and I don't want you to think I'm not asking your question, but I'll ask this one. One of the fellows mentioned that I wasn't asking their question. So how does Dominion expect to regain credibility for their systems for Republican voters?
Listen, I really appreciate the time and effort that everyone on this call has put into asking questions and to listening to our humbling and transparency when it came to the data entry errors on this particular election. We have, if there are any more questions from the public, we're happy to take them, and we're happy to respond in writing. But I think the topic of this call was to address the header issue. I think we've covered it. And again, if there are additional issues or concerns, we're happy to take those and respond in writing. And so I'll leave it there.
Okay. Okay. And I agree. I really do think we covered pretty much all of the relevant questions. I agree with you on that, Nicole. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into the last part of the meeting, which is the second public comment. Our board meetings always have a second public comment now. And our second public comment is for any, it doesn't have to be an agenda item. It can be anything under the board's jurisdiction. So what we're going to do is open up the call lines. For that, if you're on, you can raise your hand and then.
Ronald Knapp.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Knapp.
Chair Williams,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to thank you again and all of the board members here. I have to address the training. Last November, I was the poll watcher, and unfortunately, that location at Ward 2 didn't get into operation until 8:40 in the morning. The reason was because of an interface issue with the poll book. The poll book wasn't plugged in properly, and the same thing occurred again at this same ward in Nanticoke, Ward 2. I was the first to vote at the ward. The same issue again was the reason why the poll book wasn't connected properly. I asked of the judge of elections to call out for assistance, and he refused to seek advice from an IT person or a Dominion associate. I feel that this was I don't know if it was a deliberate act or what, but for the same thing to have occurred twice, one election after another, and he knew how to rectify the problem because of the issue from last November's election. I actually left the poll, the Ward 2, because I had to check other polling locations. And I returned at 8:30, and fortunately it was up and running by then. I have to state, I completed my vote during that time. The Dominion machine then printed my ballot. I went to move it from the machine, the printer, to the tabulator, and the judge stopped me and stated that that was the responsibility of the poll worker. I insisted on doing it myself. He stated I couldn't. I then insisted I observe the printed ballot be moved to the tabulator. The poll worker moved it to the tabulator for me. Now, I sent you an email in respect to that, Madam Chair. And I hope that this is addressed, because obviously this judge at that ward does not know what his responsibility and the voters' liberty is. He took my liberty away from me. And that's how I feel about that. Now, a dry run is an absolute necessity with respect to the next November election. Somebody from the board and Luzerne County officiators, as well as Dominion Machine, should have a machine that is prepped. Just, I don't know if you could do it with one machine, but there should be a dry run performed with all officiating people, including Justin Barron's from the Republican committee, as well as the DNC committee, so that everybody is on board and checking the balances, okay? Now, as for the write-in process, I know it is very overwhelming, and I thank you again for taking the time to address these very important subjects that we're talking about. But the write-in process is overwhelming, and I appreciate it again for your time and dedication and your patriotism to the whole board. Thank you again. Signing off.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. I just want to say, and to anybody else on the call, he brought up about a concern he said he had sent in, and all of the concerns or questions or complaints that have been sent in are being compiled. They're going to be addressed. Every single one will be looked into. The Office of Law has assured us of that, and they're putting the list together, and they're assigning several solicitors to address that and work on that. So it is something also that I personally, and I'm sure the other board members would agree with, will be something we will follow up with, will be following up with, and continue to follow up with, to make sure that we get the answers and how all of the questions, concerns, complaints are how they're going to be resolved or addressed. So
Denise,
yes, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. First of all, I have to apologize in advance for my abrasive remarks here. We're paying people good money here in this county. I don't see a reason why we're having this problem. We want to put the blame squarely on somebody. Let's put it on the county, first of all. These machines should have been tested. They should have been opened. Based on the fact that the primary election went in a disaster, the November election went in a disaster, and now we're in a primary election again in a disaster. All these excuses that, oh, well, you know, we didn't get a chance to check them. Oh, well, I'm not really sure if it was my job or whose job it was. Oh, well, it was the longest ballot that we ever had in the county. Oh, well, we have all these excuses. Nicole from Dominion was abrasive and condescending to you, Madam Chair, and to this board and to the public. There is absolutely no reason in the world why these machines malfunctioned like this, number one. Number two, we disenfranchised every single Republican in this county by simply saying we put a Democratic ballot on that screen. If I was in charge of this county, they'd be fired. Just like Donald Trump says, you're fired, they should be fired immediately. They should not be using those machines ever again. We should be doing paper ballots. We should be doing something different because Dominion is condescending. They said, oh, well, you know, we're not going to talk about other counties. You know why? Because they're not running their elections right there either. We're having problems in this county, and Dominion is taking a hands-off approach. Nobody wants to blame anybody. Everybody wants to wipe their hands and have a kumbaya moment here. No, this isn't a kumbaya moment. We are at the integrity of our basic democracy here, folks. And we're paying a manager $137,000 a year who won't even get on the call, by the way. He doesn't even speak, okay? He's the man who the buck stops at. The second one in charge is Mr. Parsnick, who said, oh, this will never happen again. It shouldn't have happened this time. It shouldn't have happened at all. He's been around this rodeo before. This isn't his first election. There's no reason in the world for this to happen. None at all. Mr. Morgan is the director of elections and says, well, I didn't lie to anybody. Well, geez, I don't know what happened. He's the director of elections. If he didn't check the machines and Mr. Parsnick didn't check the machines, I don't think we should be blaming Dominion. That's their job. The Board of Elections has taken a hit for the whole thing. Maybe, as Mr. Nardone said, the Board of Elections maybe needs to examine the machines. But there was always a public review of these machines, always. And if the public doesn't show up, that's no excuse for just throwing a machine out on the public step and letting people vote. And whatever comes up, comes up. This is just nonsense. There's people getting paid good money in this county to run an election properly. And the board isn't the ones getting the money. And they're dropping the ball on it. And we have Nicole, who sits on the Dominion, answers questions in a condescending attitude. Like it was just a human error. No, it wasn't a human error. It was disenfranchising Republican voters. They don't want to vote now. They don't want to vote now because of a simple mistake that should have been caught by 3 people in this county who are getting paid by the taxpayers. And that's unacceptable. And I would like to continue on with my diatribe here, but you know what? I think you get the message. This county needs to step up their game and stop embarrassing us at every turn. I want Mr. Morgan to resign. I want Parsnick to resign, and Dave Pedri already resigned. This is great. This is wonderful. Let's clean the slate and start over. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I certainly appreciate it. And I apologize for my abrasive comments, but darn it, this got to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for your comments. Ms. Glennon?
Hi, thank you. Claudia Glennon, Salem Township. And since it seems to be an important thing to comment on, I'm also a former naval commander. I want to thank you for you, Ms. Williams, and the rest of the board surviving the flogging tonight. And I do think that there are things that need to be addressed and looked at, and I appreciate your comments. And not just tonight, but before. I think that this is a board that is taking the right track and doing the right thing. And disenfranchisement means not being able to vote when there are provisional ballots, mail-in ballots, and there are other ways that individuals are not being disenfranchised. But I understand the upset. If it had been the reverse situation, I'm sure that there would have been as much comment from the other side too. And I hope that you won't, in your discussions and deliberations and the decisions that you make going forward, that you won't let this digress into the conspiracy theories that have continued to plague us since November of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Russ Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a voter in Swarsville Borough. I'm also the Republican candidate for the mayoral office in Swarsville. Regarding the earlier conversation, I would just like to say a few things. First of all, it's clear to me that the issue is with the vetting of the process. I did not hear anyone step up to say they knew the exact cause, and I think that's the key issue here. Everyone seems to have the same question. So was it Dominion? Was it the county? And exactly who was responsible for that? I also heard some comments regarding areas of improvement, especially around the process. For example, how to inform the polling places, the election judges, about how to respond in a circumstance like this. I heard Mr. Morgan say he phoned the election judges. I also heard earlier that there were 192 polling places. So I think to be able to do that in an expeditious way is something that needs to be done in a different way. I don't think that the options for Republicans to vote once this issue was discovered was clearly described at all polling places. In Swearsville, we have 3 wards, and I know at least 2 of them did not get the clear instructions about how to advise the voters. I think it leads to an overall issue of training for the poll workers. There are other examples. In at least one of the wards, the polls were not open at 7 a.m. Once again, it also happened in the November election. And I know that there's some voters who can only vote between 7 and 8 on their way to work, for example. And I wonder how many people were disenfranchised regarding the lack of the polls being open at the appropriate time. I also understand that the instructions about how to operate the machines was not clear. So I just wanted to review those quickly from my perspective, what I've heard from the meeting and what I've heard from some other folks in town. I'd also like to relate an issue that I specifically had regarding the election. When the proclamation for the election was published in the newspaper on Friday, for the Swearsville mayoral race, there were 5 female candidates on the Democratic ballot. All of those names were correct. Where my name should have appeared as the Republican mayoral candidate, the name of a person running for borough council office was in the paper instead of my name. I initially called the newspaper. They informed me that that information came from the election bureau. So I called and spoke to Mr. Morgan. He said he would look into it. He responded within an hour saying that they did in fact make an error. He apologized for the error. He took responsibility for it. And I asked what correction could be made or what could be done in order to inform the voters of Swearsville about my candidacy. And he really said there wasn't anything that could be done. And I felt really upset about that. There's a lot of people that only see the local election information in the newspaper. And I feel that had I not been the only Republican on the candidate on the ballot, that could have negatively affected my outcome. So it's my first experience at this level of detail with the election process, and it hasn't been one that's gone smoothly, let's just say. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Donahue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Parsnick, during the hearings that the county council held about this election problem and some of the previous election board meetings, he assured me that this time around, the county would not screw up the write-in votes. And I'm wondering why with an electronic system that scans the ballot, the write-in votes aren't reported instantaneously as soon as the ballot scans. And also, it already appears that whoever's counting the votes is already creating the category of scattered. And the issue during those previous meetings is that we would not have scattered. We would actually list every write-in vote for each person for each office. And Mr. Parsnick said that's what was going to happen, but that hasn't happened at all. And it seems like that you're going in the other direction with the scattered category, which I thought was going to be out as we move forward. So is it possible to create a referendum question for the county next time around at the general election where the public can vote as to whether or not we want to keep these electronic voting machines, or we want to just get rid of them altogether and go back to some sort of paper system. And a third, do you really know what the intent was of the individual who apparently made this data error? Do you know for certain that someone didn't do this on purpose just to shove it in everybody's face that the Democrats won the presidency? Because I was told at the election site in Hazleton, the firehouse in old Ward 14, which is Ward 6 now, I was told that it said Democratic ballot because it's a democratic system. That's what I was told. I wasn't told it was a data error. I was told by the judge in Ward 6 Hazleton that it was done on purpose, and that all it means is that we have a democratic system. So if there's any truth to that, maybe there's not, can't we create some kind of balance by, during the general election, putting on the top of the ballot republic ballots in honor of the fact that the country's a republic? Is that something that's doable? That's it. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Urban.
Sorry, I had to unmute here. So I'm listening to all of this, and quite honestly, what I see is, or what I hear, number one, the county has outsourced most of its election operations, one to Dominion and two to Election IQ LLC, who handles the mail-in ballots and the paper creation. There were numerous screw ups, and obviously the county, should be double checking all of this, not blaming necessarily the companies that are service providers. They're only printing or putting together what we give them. And so in-house, we have a huge problem with people not doing their diligence and checking their work. I have to echo what Eric Mark, from the Citizens Voice had to say the other day. And who proofread any of the ballots? When you look at Election IQ, they made a mistake in Wilkes-Barre Township on I guess 215 ballots, because I happened to catch a letter that was never publicized to me as a council member or any of my colleagues, or I don't know if it was mentioned to the board, but there was a vote for one initially printed on a bad ballot, and then subsequently the voters that had a bad ballot were identified, and the second ballot was sent out for a vote for two in a local council race, and they should have voted for two council members. So that's a huge problem. That taints the entire election process in Wilkes-Barre Township. In Swearsville, I guess there was a constable candidate that was printed on the wrong ward. Once again, you have the problem with the mayor's race. Franklin Township, there was 20 votes still left on the actual tabulators, because I talked to the judge of election out there from the last election, and they had to clear that off. They were using paper until about 10:30. It seems that nobody's checking the equipment before it goes out the door. And I have a real problem with that, paying county officials, county workers, good money to do a shoddy job and really to tick off the public. Disenfranchisement comes in many forms, from late poll opens, equipment failures, poll books not working, printers not working. My own poll book, where I'm, in Ward 9 in Wilkes-Barre, was not working again. This is second election that the poll book was broken. It seems like the poll workers aren't given proper communications as far as which passwords to use to enable the proper ballot. I was getting numerous stories about third-party candidates. They weren't able to sign into the poll books. They had some signed in street lists. Some were just told to go vote on the machine. It's such a haphazard process that I don't have any full faith and confidence in Luzerne County's election process. When it comes to candidates, you already know where they live. You have their address, you have their candidate paperwork. Why isn't anybody checking the templates that are being put together on these machines, and also the ballots being put together? You've outsourced so much work that what are you guys doing in-house? And quite honestly, council is the legislative branch. We can just provide you the money. The Board of Elections is the sole body that's responsible for the conduct of elections based under Title 25 and Title 53. So, we can't step on your toes. We can partner with you as the Board of Elections, provide you the funding to do whatever audits you feel are necessary to get it right in the future. But, the past three elections, I don't think it's really a Dominion problem. I said, if you really want to dispel that rumor of the 2020 election where Donald Trump won our county by over 20,000 votes, simply take 5,000 paper ballots, rerun them through a machine as a self-audit, And if it comes up 5,000 to 0, you know the machines are counting properly. These things are simply ballot marking devices. They print off a ballot after you make a selection. The problem is when you're making selections that people don't set up the templates correctly on the programming side. And that might be a problem where we are giving, like I said, the vendor the wrong information. So they have every right to defend themselves because, you know, we hand them the files and then we say, put it together. But then once we get the files back, we should be looking at all of that stuff and doing a second pass at it to glance it over to make sure these elections go off without a hitch. So, you know, when I hear candidates get disenfranchised, when I see, you know, a vote for one versus a vote for two in a council race, I mean, you're talking about elections, local elections where 1 or 2 votes do make a difference. Every write-in vote counts because you might have people that just simply write in for like a borough auditor or something like that. You know, they may want to take that seat. So you can't scatter votes in a local election year. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. Training for poll workers, I think the information that was disseminated was all over the place. A lot of poll workers said, we're not coming back. We're not going to work for somebody that's so chaotic that doesn't even know what they're doing. I mean, I talked to some election officials that say, we're not working any more elections because you guys are a mess. So I don't know where you want to go from here, but I think we need a house cleaning. I think, you know, I'm glad Mr. Pedri decided to exit. I think others need to exit as well. I think we do need a clean house. You have 6 months to prepare for an election. And, you know, you had 6 months to prepare for this one, knowing that you were going to be under the microscope by some of us again, and you screwed it up once again. So I you know, take issue with the county workers. I know a lot of them know what they're doing, but, you know, I heard even like one of the Conynghams, there was nothing on a memory card. It was blank. So, I mean, people get back to me and talk to me about stuff, you know, that's not getting out to the public. And I think there's some dishonesty within the county management area that they're not forthright with the communications that come to council that might not even be going to the board. And, you know, we're hearing this buzz from other sources and not the leaders where it should be coming from. You know, it seems like you want to sweep these problems under the rug, but they all come, the truth always comes out. And like I said, I really want an over-under report because I know, you know, if I talked to one voter that got a Democratic ballot who's a Republican, there probably were others just like her because she, you know, at that particular poll, because, you know, somebody goes on, you're showing there's a Democratic ballot for both Republicans and Democrats. How does that voter know, unless they pay attention to who their council candidates are, which most of them don't, know if they're the legitimate candidates they should be voting for? You know, and I feel bad for Mr. Knapp, who has a 50, you know, he's behind by 50 votes, and that could have impacted his race. I mean, if it were up to me, I would throw out the entire election, start over, pay the money, and just put out a whole new set of, you know, machines or paper ballots and run them through the tabulators. I mean, the tabulators, people need to realize all they are just simple counters. They just grab the paper, they're scanners that can scan both sides. And at the end of the night, they just pretty much tabulate, you know, the county tabulates the votes that's on them. So it's not a difficult process. We happen to buy a bad setup. That was Manager Pedri's, you know, his recommendation, which he usurped the board's power at the time to recommend those machines when they could have taken an all-inclusive machine where the ballot actually gets printed and automatically fed into a tabulator where somebody has to instead of somebody having to physically, you know, put it into a tabulator, because you have people walking out with their ballots as well, who then those ballots aren't even cast. Because I had one voter that actually walked out with hers and she had to run back to the poll before it closed to put it back in. So there's so much disenfranchisement that goes on. It's all in little forms, but all of those little votes add up into possibly turning an election. You know, when you're looking at a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to turn an 80,000, you know, number election, all you need to do is screw up maybe 8 to 10 votes per precinct around the Commonwealth. And that will overturn even something like on a presidential election here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But for us to keep being in the spotlight as Luzerne County, I'm tired of getting the black eyes as a county councilman, as a county, and I want to see something seriously done. And, you know, hopefully the next manager that comes in cleans the entire executive staff out in this county, and we start fresh with some people that are true leaders, that know how to do a job, that have the foresight and the diligence to take the responsibility, say, I own it, I screwed up, I messed up, this is what we're going to do to fix it. But I mean, first of all, it shouldn't even happen.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Okay. How about Mr. Jones, Mr. Charlie Jones?
Thank you. I'm a voter in Swearsville Borough, Ward 2. And I'd like to start off by saying I do agree with Mr. Urban that I would like to know exactly what our election bureau does do, because all I've heard is what is not their responsibility. Secondly, when I voted in November of last year, I'm 6'2". Had I not heard the printer running below the machine, I would have had no idea that it actually printed a ballot, because the process was not explained to me when I checked in at the Dana Street School in 44. When I reached down, there were 2 ballots there. There was mine and then whoever was prior to me that was left there. When I went to the scanner, I scanned mine, said to the other gentleman, this one was also there. He took it and said, well, I'll take care of this. It was not scanned to my knowledge. I have no idea what happened to it. But I'd like to relay what happened to me in Ward 2 of Swearsville Borough on election day of this year. I was there early, about 7 o'clock. I think it was right when it should have been open, and it wasn't open. It was then opened shortly thereafter. Upon entering, it was obvious that there was an issue with the machines. There were the judge of elections and the other folks that were employed by the election bureau were running around trying to get the machines to work. They obviously weren't. I happen to know the judge of elections. She asked me, said, hey, do you know anything about computers? So I said, well, a little bit. She took me over to one of the machines along with another gentleman that was there, showed me the instructions to try to get those machines to work. It had to do with putting a card in, entering a PIN number, and then going from there. We followed those directions to a T, without missing a step, and those machines would not work. The instructions were completely inaccurate. They did not reflect the steps you needed to take in order to make those machines work. We finally tried to call to get support. There were 6 numbers listed. The first 5 numbers immediately went to, the first 4 numbers immediately went to voicemail. The 5th number was answered by someone. I could hear things in the background. They then hung up. The 6th number just continued to ring without being answered. So there was no support for these poll workers, who I don't blame, by the way, in any way whatsoever, because I heard about the instruction that they were given, which was, embarrassing. While we were there, a roving IT support person happened to show up, and I asked him about the directions. He said he had nothing to do with it. Of course, I knew that. But in talking to him, I found out that he didn't even know till the Thursday prior that he would be supporting this election through roving IT. And then on Friday, after being chosen, this is the Friday before election, he was handed a manual and told, here's what you'll need. Was given no training to be a roving IT support person. Finally, after contacting another polling place, did we get someone that actually walked us through the process. Now, keep in mind, I don't work for the election bureau. I have nothing to do with them. I was a voter trying to get my vote cast. Only through contacting another poll place were we able to get the instructions we needed to get the machine going. Then you wouldn't believe the confusion, because there are different PIN numbers for Democrat, Republican, and then non-affiliated. And that would only be for the ballot questions, obviously. Well, because no one had explained, and Mr. Morgan, you say you may have called people. This was long after 10 after 7. No one was explained the fact that that PIN number for Republican was going to show up as Democratic. There was at least one voter that was trying to vote. Incidentally, he worked for the Postal Service. He was trying to vote and could not. So he was told his only option was to be given a provisional ballot, which I'm now hearing is not the case. There's something called an emergency ballot, which was not given as an option. So let me sum all this up by saying we have a lot of problems here. Number one, the current election bureau and you, Mr. Morgan, will not take responsibility for what happened. Number two, the multiple election poll workers that are out there were given very insignificant and ineffective training, and they should be embarrassed. The election bureau should be embarrassed and should feel responsible for putting these people in the polls without giving them the instruction they needed. And number three, the support was not there. These poor folks were taking disgruntled voters, were being yelled at, were being chastised. And I don't know what they get paid, but I guarantee you it wasn't enough. So thank you. That's all I have to say. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Constable John Shimo was supposed to be on the ballot in Swearsville Borough Ward 2, and he was missing from the ballot. So in Ward 2, we had the mayor, who was incorrectly published in the newspaper as a separate name, and we have the constable. The only Republican candidates for both of those offices
had negative effects because of incompetence on behalf of the Election Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Leo.
Hey, Madam Chairwoman. Pretty much I agree with it, what everybody said, but I've been voting in Jackson Township for almost 31 years. Okay. This is the most embarrassing thing that I've ever seen. The poll workers were excellent. They tried to do everything they could to get us to vote, but I've been voting there for a long time and it never took me 45 minutes to vote. Okay. I'm not going to go through everything all the other gentlemen said because I agree with them wholeheartedly, except for one point. The voters weren't disenfranchised. I was there at 6:45 with a bunch of other.
Should be a really fun experience. We make low maintenance.
I was there at about 6:45 with a bunch of other people. They weren't disenfranchised when we took 45 minutes to vote and they had to vote on emergency ballots. They were angry. There's going to be a difference. Okay. If the board cannot handle this assignment that Luzerne County has given them, you need to step down because we expect better. Okay. We don't expect this. Okay. We're not disenfranchised. We're not going to not come back and vote. We're just going to remove the people that can't do the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Behrens?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. I just want to reiterate what I said in the beginning. We had many voters in the Republican Party that did not vote because they were frustrated, they were angry. They felt that this, what we call now human error, coding error, whatever it was, the perception was there. And they did not want to vote. So I want to speak on their behalf that did not get their vote. The Board of Elections has the power to make decisions. Your position that you guys are all in is a very powerful position when it comes to the elections. And don't forget that, because truly you guys have the right to verify the election and certify it. You guys have the power. And I just want to make sure that you guys do your job and make sure that you do it to the best of Luzerne County, of both parties. The other thing I want to bring up is it was posted in the newspaper that I heard saying that we could come to check these for public to check these voting machines. I was called in 2020 as the chairman for the Republican Party to come watch the machines, which we did. That never happened this year. I am more than happy to come down. It all takes is a phone call, and then I can call candidates to come down to check this, the ballot machines. The communication, yes, I'm the chairman of the Republican Party. There's someone the chairman of the Democratic Party, but we're both willing to come down and be partners with this to make sure that the election process and that everybody votes count. All it takes is a simple phone call to go through there to do this. I just ask again that the Board of Elections, you guys have the power. You guys are the ones that certify the election. You guys are the ones that do that decision making. And I just ask that you take that wholeheartedly and take it to your best ability. I want to thank all the poll workers out there that did all their job. I want to thank, they did an outstanding job. I know it's when you're in the front lines, the people just want to argue with you and that area, but they did an amazing job with the knowledge and the limited knowledge they had. We're the leaders of the free world. We go around to other countries teaching people how to do voting processes of democracy, and we can't get it right here in Luzerne County. Let's try to set an example for the future so that the Republican voters can come out and feel that their vote is counted. I was appalled by Dominion and the way that she treated Luzerne County and the residents. And I hope that people take that in consideration in the future. We do not have to be belittled or talked down to as Luzerne County. We're voters, and we're voters that are voting people that we want to represent us in office. And that's the most important piece. So I just, again, want to reiterate that you guys are the Board of Elections. You guys have the power. Thank you. And I wish you guys a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Behrens. Ms. Hauk?
Yes, thank you. I've listened to the entire meeting, and I would just like to say I understand the anger, but I think anger directed at this Board of Elections is a little bit, or actually a lot, misplaced, because the majority of this board was only appointed in March. Ms. Williams, I believe you were appointed in April. So, to talk about reconstituting the board or removing people from the board, I believe that you guys actually should be commended for stepping into the middle of a firestorm right now and listening to all of this and pledging to move forward. I am so appreciative of your service and your stepping up to serve on this board. And I just think from your prompt response to these issues that you have shown that you want to make things better. I was appointed to or elected to the county council in 2011. I've been on county council since the beginning of home rule. And, our goal in home rule has always been, are we doing the best we can? Is this the best we can do? And I think that we see repeatedly in some places that it's not the best we can do, but what we need are people like you who are willing to get us to a better place and to doing better things. I have a lot of hope. I understand that things went wrong with the election, but I think that everything there can be fixed, but we do need good people to stay at work. And so I commend you for that. We convened an election inquiry committee, as I'm sure you know, and we did not disband the committee. Mr. McGinley kept the committee active, and we had intended to have a post-election meeting to see how things went. And so we had made several recommendations, and I know all of them were not implemented. One of them dealt with having dedicated phone lines that were available to poll workers so there wouldn't be a problem. There were several other things that we've heard that transpired with this election that might have been addressed, but again, we had a turnover in staff and we had a turnover on the elections board. And I think that we all can do a little bit better. We're going to reconvene the elections inquiry committee. And I would ask that the election board be an integral part of that reconvening so that we can all talk about how we can do things better here in Luzerne County. So I would appreciate it if board members would be part of that reconvening of the elections inquiry meeting. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Bognet?
Thank you all for your time here tonight, 2.5 hours to hear from voters and candidates. I really appreciate all of your time. One of the board members just poured himself a drink, and I can understand the wanting to do that because after 2.5 hours, we could all use a drink here. But I'll tell you, after 2 elections where this has gone on, I could use a drink. I really think the main point is, where do we go forward from here? And, you all are not full-time paid employees. There are 2 sets of people being paid and that are accountable to the taxpayers. One of those is Dominion, and one of those is the county election staff and the director of elections, Mr. Morgan. So number one, I think it's time for a fresh start. I think the only way to get through this appearance of conflict of interest and of incompetence, frankly, is for us to move on from Dominion. The Dominion representative, while I respect her service to our country, she was not answering our substantive questions. She did not explain why none of our bureau staff would have had the chance to see why it wasn't headline Republican votes. She also kept talking about a paper trail of ballots. None of the questions were about the paper trail of ballots. The questions were, why were the computer screens wrong? Why were there huge tabulation issues of getting your ballot printed out and into the machine? Why wasn't there good training from Dominion? It wasn't about a paper trail. That was a talking point that she used to paper over the profound problems with this election. What is our recourse? Our recourse is to terminate them and to move on. My preference would be back to paper ballots, but you all have the power to make that decision. We need a fresh start without Dominion in order to gain trust in the integrity of our elections here. Number 2, our staff. Mr. Morgan made a profound and shocking admission. He never walked through and did a dry run of the screens where the vast majority of voters were voting. That's amazing to me. He did not go through the machines and see how the software, do a final check. That would be what the captain of the ship does before the ship is set sail, is to go through that checklist. I think that's a profound abdication of responsibility. And again, sometimes a fresh start is needed. And a fresh start would be, Mr. Pedri has moved on. I think Mr. Morgan knows he's not qualified for this job. I don't know how he was hired. I don't know how he has any background in running elections. I don't know that he has any background in software. I don't know how he was hired, but I think you know as board members, and I think he probably knows in his own heart, he's not qualified for this position. When you layer on top of that, that he worked for a candidate that will be up for election next year in a very important office, really the control of Congress can rest on that. To have someone who worked for that candidate in a position of running our elections when we've already had multiple foul-ups, that creates such an impression of a conflict of interest that none of us deserve that. We don't want to be having this discussion next year. Let's get rid of this now. Let's have a fresh start with new leadership, and let's try to solve this problem. And I know we can do it if we have a fresh start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bognet. Ms. Seidman?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to reiterate Ms. Hauk's comments. We would, I'm on the Election Inquiry Committee, which will be reconvened, love to have your participation. It's really important. I do want to know, I have a question. There were so many concerns in the last election about problems with mail-in ballots. And I wanted to know, the mail-in ballots this time did not seem to be a problem. Were there significant problems with mail-in ballots? I hear a lot of people say, let's go back to paper ballots. You know, I have a brother who lives in Colorado. He's never used a paper ballot. They've only had mail-in ballots, and it runs very well. I also just want to say, I guess maybe I'm more naive than some people, but Mr. Bognet, I just can't see where the fact that Mr. Morgan worked for Mr. Cartwright is of anything that he would do nefariously to affect a forthcoming election. Maybe I'm naive. But I think those are really terrible allegations. I do want to agree with Mr. Behrens. I think that I talked to a lot of people when I found out about this issue of the Democratic heading on the Republican ballot. And I know a lot of people that told me they walked away without voting, a lot of Republicans. And that was a significant issue, regardless of the mistake, regardless. And I think this happened very early in the morning, the people I talked to. So I'm not sure people offered them provisional ballots at that time. They just left. And so all in all, I think there's a lot of meat here for us to digest and to make for a much better general election going forward. And I think we have to start right away. And thanks for calling this meeting so promptly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Seidman. Next caller.
Oh, hi, this is Jason Carr from Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. I would just like to share my experience voting actually in Monroe County in Saylorsburg. I actually went into the polling location. I signed a book. They verified my signature. They gave me a ticket. I went to another person. They asked me whether I was Democrat or Republican. The ticket indicated I was Republican. She gave me a Republican ballot. They handed me a pen. I filled out my ballot, my Republican ballot, and then I proceeded to put the ballot in a machine that tabulated the ballot. It was seamless. The poll was open. There was no confusion. The directions were clear, and it was simple. Unfortunately, the issues that I heard tonight for the last 2.5 hours are frightening to say the least. Mr. Bognet, Mr. Urban, Mr. Griffith, all made tremendous points tonight. and they're all correct. It is very clear to me that Mr. Morgan, Miss Williams, Mr. Parsnick, Mr. Nardone, and Ms. Sedman are completely overwhelmed with this process. It never should have happened, and I hope this is a rallying call to all Republicans in Luzerne County in November to throw out all the garbage and corruption that is ingrained with all the schemers that partake in the politics inside the county courthouse. It's disgusting. And you should be all ashamed of yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Next caller. Any other callers?
Brian Shiner from Kingston.
Hello, Mr. Shiner. Go ahead.
Good evening. I just wanted to say quickly, in consideration of what was stressed here tonight, that an audit be done of the primary election, I have to ask, what will we find? I think pretty much that the ballots that went through the tabulators are the same as the results that we already have. The thing that we won't find in an audit is how many people walked away from the polls without voting. And we won't find how many people didn't bother to go to the polls, figuring it'd just be a waste of time because what they already heard about what was going on. So I think the idea of the audit, it sounds good, but I don't really think the results are going to be worth the expense, because we'll never know how many people just didn't vote because of this. But we have to learn from this and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shiner. Next caller. Any other callers? Doesn't sound like there are any other callers. Before we adjourn, I personally would just like to say, first, I want to thank, on behalf of the board, I'll thank the representatives who came tonight from our invite, Dominion Voting Systems, the Luzerne County Election Bureau, and County Management. Thank you for sharing the information you shared with everyone regarding the error. Personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board right now, but myself, is that I'd like to see the election board work cooperatively with the Election Bureau over the upcoming months prior to the November election, evaluating and reviewing all aspects of the election process with the goal of putting in place written policies and procedures, timelines, checklists, and improved trainings for all aspects of the elections. I strongly believe this will help improve the process and security of our county's elections, and I personally would be glad to participate and I will encourage the other board members to participate with the election inquiry committee. Do any of the other board members want to share anything before I call for a motion to adjourn?
Well, this is Audrey. Just come down and watch us adjudicate ballots. We're going to be doing that for the next 2 weeks, and it's open to the public.
Yes, I did want to share too before I adjourned. I'm glad you brought that up. Usually I say our next meeting is, we're going to continue the process tomorrow and daily until all the write-ins are written in. After that, there would be the certification of the vote, but that has to wait until we get all the write-ins written in. And then after that, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 16th. And at that meeting, we're going to be continuing to follow up on this post-election concerns, issues, inquiries. I think we'll probably be doing that for a little bit. I don't see that we had July meetings scheduled for when they scheduled for the year, but that may be a possibility now to add some meetings. So with that said, what's coming up for the board, I will ask if there's a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming, participating, allowing us to listen, to hear all of your comments. And there was a quick question I just noticed. You can come in and view the adjudication process. It's at Penn Plaza. It's on the third floor of, I think it's 20 Pennsylvania Avenue, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the third floor. It starts at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning. And tomorrow we decided we'll be there until 4:30. And each day we will decide, but it probably will be exactly about that time, 9 to about 4:30 or so. And it's the third floor. There's a courtroom on the third floor, and it's take a right after you get off the elevator. It's at the end of the hall, and any of the public can come and observe and watch, watch as we adjudicate the write-in votes right now. Okay. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will motion. This is Kathy.
Okay, Ms. Roth, and is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nardone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition, any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Good
good
night.
night.
Thank you. Have a good evening.